The Russian Mi-24 Hind embodies some of the key tenets of Russian engineering.
It's Russian.
It is bulky and durable to the point of being nicknamed the Flying Tank. We've covered a couple American-made transport and assault helicopters, but we thought it would be interesting to branch out and observe some military crafts from foreign nations, serving as the helicopter of antagonists in many games and movies. The Hind is an easily recognizable symbol of Eastern world power. Over the course of its 50-year service record, the Hind has proven itself to be a worthy adversary to its Western counterparts. As always, consider subscribing to the channel if you enjoy the video, and leave a like if you learned something new about the MiL Mi-24 Hind. Mikhail Leontievich MiL was a Russian aerospace pioneer throughout the 1960s. One developing need he noticed was for an aircraft that could both carry troops into combat and act as a flying armored gunship. His first prototype was presented to the Russian Ministry of Aircraft in 1966. Some military strategists were impressed with the ambitious new design, but more senior advisors were skeptical due to its perceived impracticality. The theoretical helicopter seemed to not have a straightforward sense of purpose. It was part transport vehicle, part gunship, and part scouting vehicle. It was meant to be rugged and tough, but still fast and aggressive. After observing the success of American multi-use helicopters in the Vietnam War, however, even the skeptics were convinced, and the green light was given to start designing a final model for the helicopter. Two versions were designed, a 7-ton version with a single engine and a 10.5-ton version with dual engines, both using the 1700 horsepower Isotov engine. The larger dual-engine variant garnered more support and was decided as the final model, but first the military had a few demands. For one, the Russian army wanted a heavy machine gun to be mounted on the front of the helicopter. They also wanted it to carry anti-tank missiles, as well as guided and unguided rockets.
You know, I have one simple request, and that is to have sharks with frickin' laser beams attached to their heads.
Work on the design continued under the supervision of Leontievich MiL until his passing in 1970. At this point, the helicopter was considered ready for production, and the first Hinds were delivered to the Russian army in 1972. It was called the Crocodile by the Russians due to its aggressive appearance and tough exterior, while NATO intelligence reporters named the new helicopter the Hind. The current production model of the Hind requires 2 pilots and 1 weapons systems officer and has space for 8 troops to be carried for transport. It has a length of 57 feet, or about 5.39 adult male ligers, which are, in fact, real animals. It has a long rotor diameter of about 57 feet and a height of about 21 feet. The maximum takeoff weight of the Hind is roughly 26,000 pounds, which is over 2 tons greater than that of the American Black Hawk. The Hind is also faster than the Black Hawk, with a top speed of 208 miles per hour compared to the Black Hawk's 183 miles per hour. In fact, the Hind was the holder of several helicopter speed records for the first decade that it was in service. However, the Black Hawk does have the Hind beat when it comes to altitude. The Hind has a maximum altitude of 16,100 feet, while the Black Hawk can fly up to about 19,000 feet. Some interesting facts about the Hind's design are that the main rotor was given a slight tilt in order to compensate for the craft's tendency to drift while hovering, and the landing gear was given the same tilt in the opposite direction so that the rotor would be kept straight while the craft is on the ground. This means that when the Hind is resting on a flat surface, its body is slightly skewed at 2.5 degrees from a straight vertical. The rotor blades themselves were also given a slight 12-degree upward incline to address the helicopter's tendency to roll at higher speeds, and the missile pylons are placed on the wingtips rather than the fuselage in order to further improve stability. In terms of weaponry, most Hinds use the Yak B 12.7mm machine gun mounted underneath its chin. The Hind can also carry a number of different caliber machine guns, including a 20mm autocannon and dual-barreled 23mm autocannons. Similar to the Black Hawk, the Hind can carry external fuel tanks on its arm attachments that extend the flight range up to roughly 700 miles. These arm attachments can also carry rockets like the Swatter anti-tank missile. R-60 infrared missiles can also be added, as well as mine dispersal systems, just like the Black Hawk. The Hind definitely takes some notes from its Western contemporaries when it comes to versatility. The Hind was initially introduced in some lesser-known conflicts. It was first used to airdrop supplies to Ethiopia during their war with Somalia in 1977. The first extensive use of the Hind in a combat setting was in the historic Soviet-Afghan War when it terrorized Mujahideen fighters. That is, of course, until Tom Hanks supplied the Mujahideen with American Stinger missiles in the late 80s. A fun fact is that the Hind had a design flaw that made it particularly vulnerable to shoulder-launched Stinger missiles. The engines of the Hind were placed in an inline configuration in order to minimize the frontal profile of the vehicle. This was thought to be safer, as it made the Hind a smaller target to frontal enemy fire. However, this configuration also caused the exhaust gases to dissipate less efficiently, creating massive heat sources for Stingers to lock onto. Hinds were actually so good at attracting heat-seeking missiles that they were used to shield other transport aircraft flying in and out of Afghanistan. Hind pilots began using new tactics to try and counter the deadly Stinger missiles. Pilots began flying low to the ground in an attempt to use terrain and buildings as cover, and would briefly pop up to heights of only about 200 feet to fire their weapons. More countermeasure flares were also added to later models of the aircraft in order to further mask the helicopter's own thermal signature. By the end of the war, 74 Hinds were shot down. This number would have most likely been much higher, but many Hinds were able to make it back to base after being hit thanks to their durable construction. Although the Hind had many of its weaknesses highlighted in Afghanistan, the craft did still serve its purpose in many ways. Hinds were able to protect convoys, performed high-speed assaults on pre-designated targets, and hunter-killer teams of Hinds that would travel in pairs were responsible for many Afghan military and civilian losses, while the Mujahideen did a good job of adapting new tactics to counter the Hinds. Russian pilots further evolved their combat strategies as well. Dedicated door gunners started to be more common, so potential threats could be eliminated. In some Hinds, compartments were carved out in the rear of the craft, so backward-facing gunners could similarly be added, but this idea was scrapped when an overweight weapons officer got stuck in one of the rear compartments. Yes, I'm serious. During this time in the Hind's career, it was used less as a transport craft and more as a dedicated gunship. Due to the fact that Hinds were at severe risk of being shot down, it was seen as far too risky to also carry fire teams of ground troops in the helicopters. This allowed pilots to remove armor around the midsection of the craft so that weight could be dropped and Hinds could be made more agile. Or, the difference in weight was made up for by loading the Hind with additional ammunition so that fire support capacity was greatly increased. The Hind gets a bad rep for being ineffective against the Mujahideen, but it should be noted that it was given the nickname Shaitan Arba, or Satan's Chariot, by Afghani locals. Other uses of the Hind were by the Iraqi army during the Gulf War, and by Croatia during their War of Independence. During the American War against the Taliban, the Afghan National Army also tried using the Hind. During this time, Major Caleb Nimmo became the first American to fly a Russian helicopter in a combat zone while acting as a flight instructor for the Afghan partner forces. As for current uses, Ukraine and Russia have both used the Hind in their ongoing war. The Czech Republic and Poland have donated an undisclosed amount of the helicopters to Ukraine in an attempt to aid their fight. Other operators of the Hind include the Egyptian Airforce, the Indian Air Force, and the military of Kazakhstan. In 2015, the Russian Air Force announced that they would try to replace their Mi-24 Hinds with Mi-28 Havoc helicopters. The Havoc is a two-seat attack helicopter that does not have the same transport capabilities as the Hind. While this is certainly a potential drawback, the Havoc is better optimized than the Hind when it comes to assault purposes. The Havoc is faster and more nimble, making it better suited for engaging enemy armor. However, it was decided that the Hind would be kept in service for the foreseeable future, as there is a definite advantage in having a more diversified toolset of attack helicopters. Instead of replacing the Hind, most were upgraded with new electronics, sights, carrying arms, and night vision capabilities. While the Hind has seen its fair share of punishment throughout the decades, it has proven itself to be quite the capable military helicopter. It can carry a small detachment of ground troops into combat while also acting as a sturdy and fearsome attack helicopter. It isn't the perfect craft and comes with a small amount of design flaws that make it vulnerable under certain conditions, but for the time being, we are sure to see the Hind in use by many non-Western countries. If there is a cheesy action movie or game that depicts a Russian military force, you can bet that the Hind will make an appearance.